Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
All right.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you are listening to us from, whatever platform you are listening to us on. As always, thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you for sharing this around. Thank you for the kind messages that you left. Really am excited about all the new people who've kind of tuned in and shared this as we're right in the thick of basketball season here. And I know that a lot of you guys are big motion offense, big dribble drive people out there who are listening. So I'm excited to bring this one to you in particular. And I know some of you listening might be thinking about, running that motion offense or how to implement it, specifically with the dribble drive and everything, how to establish it and get it going. So that's what we're here to bring today. A little bit of X's and O's talk the offensive side of things, and hopefully either get you some good ideas about getting that motion offense going, maybe a little bit of new ideas that you hadn't heard of, or if you're in the process of just trying to refine it and change up things a little bit, I think that you'll get something out of that as well. So let's kind of dive right into it here. If my guest is the head coach, Hartsville women's basketball. Coach Justin Johnson is here with us today. Coach, thank you so much. How are we doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your journey first. So where is the game taking you? Where's your coaching journey taking you? And what were the steps that led you to Hartsville?
My journey and a little bit about myself. I'm 33 years old. Second oldest of four young men, and I'm originally from New York. And so my family moved here around about 2000 to South Carolina, and I've been here since, to a little town called Manning here in South Carolina. So that's actually where my coaching journey started. I was a junior in high school, and I got a chance to coach under a guy who was an absolute legend. He was over 700 wins at the time at Manning High School. The gym was already named after him. And here I was, this snotty-nosed kid coming in, trying to coach. And what I loved about Coach Thames was he gave me a voice right away, and he allowed my passion to grow. And from Manning High School, I went over to Newberry College as a student assistant, worked with both the men's and the women's program there. I learned a lot. I learned a lot coaching at that level. When you're at the college level, it's just different. It's faster paced. You learn a lot more. You're diving into film a lot more. So I learned how to game plan. I learned how to film prep. I feel like I really grew in that experience. And then since then, I've been a head coach at three different schools, and a JV, three varsity jobs and then a JV job. So that's kind of my journey. And I'm here in Hartsville now. This will be my fifth season this year, and we're absolutely excited about it.
So you're on year 5 right now. So I wanted to ask you real quick, because sometimes I forget to ask this question, and I'm always curious. What about your coaching philosophy, if anything, is a little bit different now that you're in your 5th year? Anything that you would have changed from the first? Anything that's changed a lot from year 1 at Hartsville to here you are now in year 5, or if things stayed pretty much the same? Well, what's kind of been the change for you personally as a coach?
I think the biggest thing for me is over the years I've learned to allow my players to just see me a little more. And when I say see me, see who I am outside of basketball. Learn not to be as buttoned up and as serious all the time. Laugh with them, enjoy those moments. I think when I first came in, because you're so laser focused on what needs to happen, what needs to get done, you're trying to put out fires, those types of things. But as the years progress and you kind of get your system and your culture and your philosophy, your standard, all of those things in, I think then kids get to see you for who you are, as opposed to the person who's just trying to restructure a program and is changing things that, may seem a little uncomfortable to them at the time.
Yeah. And now that you've been there for as long as you have, people kind of, know what you're about and everything. And there's kind of probably a little bit more of trust built in on you, and you can kind of show a little bit more of yourself and kind of be more of who you are now, right?
Yeah. Because you're not as guarded, when you first come into a job,
Prove yourself. Yeah.
that's the thing. You're a little more guarded. You're trying to figure out who are your allies? Who can you trust? So it's a little difficult sometimes to just come in and just be absolutely open. But as time goes along, you figure out who those people are, and you figure out what you value and what the kids value, and how to meet in the middle with those things. And so I feel really good about our culture and where we've come in 5 years.
It's kind of funny, yeah. In a way, it sometimes even feels like on year one, like you're still in that like job interview phase, meeting everybody, trying to get yourself
Mhm.
like situated. It's like you're there, but it's like, wait a minute, am I really here? I don't know everything? I don't know everyone yet. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. So before we start talking a little bit about some motion offense and some dribble drive, I know that one of the things that you're passionate about is, as you put it, establishing structure off the court. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about like what does that mean and what does that kind of look like, the idea of establishing structure off the court.
Yeah, so I'll say probably year 3. When I first got here, I looked at my staff and I said, "Hey, we just need to make it to year 3." And that's nothing against the kids who are here, but I knew we needed some matriculation to happen naturally, to get some things in that we wanted. But as we hit year 3, since then, we've been very intentional about our team building and the energy we put into that. So we are fully invested in that. When we interview our players at the end of the season, the one thing they talk about is we want more of that team building stuff. We love that. So we've been very intentional about that off of the court, and giving time to that and space for that. Like last week, we had someone come in, former player from University of South Carolina. She talked to our team about what does it mean to be a team, and how to get through tough moments. And she was a part of a national championship there with Don Staley. And so when you have those types of people that can come in and pour into your kids, but you're intentional about bringing them in, that makes a difference. So that was one of those things that we put in from a structural standpoint. And then beyond that, in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall, we bring our entire program together. Here in Hartsville, I don't have the luxury of multiple feeder programs, so I only have the one. So I feel like my margin for error is not as great, when it comes down to that, compared to other large schools who may have two or three feeder programs. So we try to get it right. So we bring them all in. What I found when I first got here was we were losing kids in the transition between 8th grade and 9th grade. So they were playing in middle school, and then they get to the high school, and nothing against cheerleading, but they all would end up on the cheerleading team. So
Yeah.
so what I did was I tried to be a little more intentional. Let's get to these kids earlier. Let's bring them in. Let's let them be around our kids. And what I love about our older kids is they really take the time out to make them feel welcome, to really just embrace them, to teach them, to take time out to show them how we do what we do. And I think that's paid dividends, because last year we didn't lose a single kid in the transition between middle and high school.
That's
And
huge.
for a girls program, that is that's phenomenal, because you look at the national averages and you see the decline in participation in girls basketball, and we're trying to grow in a different way, but we're intentional about it. I pick up the phone at the end of the season and I call those parents of my 8th graders and I say, "Hey, we want your kids in here in the spring. We want them in here in the summer. We want them here in the fall." And we travel all over the place in June, and middle school players are playing up. They're playing against JV. Some of them are playing against varsity kids, and we just put them in the fire over the summer. And we feel like that makes us stronger as a middle school program, and then we'll see the dividends down the road. So, and then the last thing we really have been intentional about was implementing a weight program. This is our first year actually doing it. So a lot of girls, if you talk to them, they'll say, "Yeah, we don't lift," and I think that's, I don't know if coaches kind of shy away from it or they don't know how to do it or whatever, but it's something that I really wanted to implement, and they've hit the ground running here this fall in the weight room, and we've seen tremendous gains. We actually had Max today, on front squat, and one kid was like 50 pounds more than she was in August on her max, and she's over the moon about it. So we just love those things outside, and that structural piece that we feel like helps and enhances what we can do inside the gym.
And I'll just echo the part that you said about how just important it is to keep the girls involved, especially that transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, because it's, as you mentioned, it's tough, and the the decline in girls basketball in particular in terms of enrollment. I mean, that's real. I mean, I think I see it in my area. I see it all over the place with
Mhm.
JV teams, freshman teams being canceled, a lot of girls going to, other sports, and nothing against those, but I think that as you kind of mentioned, we have to all kind of realize, guys and girls coaches, that, we can't just assume that, especially on the girls end, that these girls are just going to be walking into us. Like, you got to
Mhm.
fight for them. You got to fight
Yeah.
and keep them, because there's a lot of other directions that they look like they're being pulled in. So no, that's really
Yeah.
good.
Oh, and I got one more thing I just wanted
Sure.
to add as far as that side was just this season. I talked to my AD at the end of the season. I said, look, I got to be better. And I'm saying this because I'm hoping some head coach out there hears me say this and they pick it up and run with it too. But I said I got to be better about coaching my coaches, making sure I'm invested in their growth. So what I implemented this fall was a coach to coaches series, and we've just embarked on a number of conversations and activities, and we've gone out and watched different college practices. And so I feel like they are like coming into this season with a lot more energy and just a little more confidence. And I plan on continuing it, but it's an intentional thing to make sure that I'm constantly investing in their growth. Head coaches, we're kind of, we're bad about it. Once the season starts, we're so locked in on team and trying to get the team there that sometimes we forget that we got assistant coaches who need to grow too. So I'm trying to be so much better in that area.
Yeah. And I think that you're right about that, though. Like, on the head coaching up front, you can get lost sometimes in all the other real important stuff that you're doing. But yeah, kind of
Hmm.
like almost like you're trying to train in your players and keeping your players throughout the season. It's kind
Hmm.
of got to do the same thing with your coaches and keep them going, keep them learning, keep them growing. Almost like you're coaching them too as well.
Yep.
All right, coach, let's get into I know specifically within the motion offense, you're a dribble drive individual. So let's talk about philosophically, why was dribble drive the right offense for your team? We'll start there. What made you know that that was what you wanted to be running?
Well, when I got here, I didn't have any post players, well, true post players. And we did well for a couple of years. We were known as a really good perimeter team. We were very guard oriented. We set actually a couple of state records, like 2 team records and 2 individual records for 3-point shooting. Like all that was there, but we didn't have post presence. So I said we need something that's going to at least make up and manufacture just points in the paint for us. And I'm actually watching Mississippi State upset UConn women one night, and Coach Schaefer's out there and they're running the dribble drive. And I'm like, man, they got those little tiny guards and they're giving UConn fits. And so I went and I just started researching there. So I started with Coach Schaefer, and I was watching some of his stuff. And then he mentioned that he sat down with the inventor of the dribble drive for a couple of weeks, and this is how he got his version. So, me being new to it, I went and I looked up, well, who invented the dribble drive? And then that's when I landed on Wahlberg. And so then I started looking at his stuff and studying his stuff. And so we've tried to blend a little bit of both here. We really like Coach Schaefer's version. I think it's really easy for our kids to digest. And it's simple. And we run it actually from our middle school on up. And that's how easy it is for our kids to really get it. But really the dribble drive it's effective mainly in your breakdown sessions, the one-on-one stuff you work on, finishing moves, those type of things. So that's kind of how we got there, is we knew we just didn't have traditional post presence. And so we just needed points in the paint. We needed something that would, in a sense, make our kids attack the basket and not settle for the jumper, even though we love the 3 ball, but we want to be a little more intentional about that.
So once you decided, all right, this is where we're going, what were the next steps in terms of the priorities, in terms of implementing it and installing it?
Well, the biggest thing was making sure we're all talking the same language with it.
Okay, yep.
So like Coach Schaefer, his terminology of like own the nail, so, and I think that's real easy for our kids. When I say, hey, here's this nail on the floor and you want to drive at this nail every time you touch the ball, just those little things, teaching them what a kick up is. When we say a kick up, what does that look like? So just that, getting on the same page was the first thing with the terminology. And then after that, it was just a matter of making sure that they understood that, their job sometimes would be to just draw to and kick. That may be the best thing you can do, even though you're trying to get a layup each time. If you can draw to and kick, you're actually going to set your teammate up for a better angle and probably a great driving lane. So just getting kids to buy into, you may not be the star of it every time, but your role in this is very important.
Was that a difficult transition for your guys? Was that different than what they had been expected to do before? What was the transition process, I guess, from what they were running or what they were used to doing before to trying to get them into the new, you know, drive and kick and all that terminology?
Yeah, I think it was because, you know, we were pretty heavy on just running sets and continuity offenses, which dribble drive is continuity, but
Yeah.
mainly sets. But with the dribble drive, there's a lot more freedom, you know. So our kids just weren't used to that level of freedom. So
Yeah,
they had to
yeah,
make
yeah.
sure they knew what a good shot was. You know, sure that's a shot you can get right now, but is that the best shot we can get? You know, so just a level of patience. I think at the high school level, if you can get about 2 reversals in dribble drive, you're probably going to get everything you want after that because the defense is just scrambling. But it's just teaching kids at this level to be patient enough to do that. Because so, you know, some kids, the first time they see a little daylight, you know, there it goes. So that's probably the biggest thing that I would say has been a transition for us, coming from just running more of a structured, here's the 1, here's the 2, here's the 3, to now it's a little more positionless in a sense, even though you have a 1 or 2 or 4, whatever. But once it gets going, I mean, the positions really don't matter.
And I mean, with that, I know that's one of the things I hear sometimes kind of brought up or referenced when it comes to in a dribble drive is that the individual skill set of your players needs to, like, in general, needs to be developed and grow, because you
Mhm,
can't, doesn't necessarily stick you to one spot and one skill
mhm.
set, and you have to develop, you know, a lot of different skills within your players so that they can run it pretty effortlessly and be able to do multiple things on the court. So was that was that difficult? Was there this need to establish or work on skills with your guys that maybe they hadn't been prioritizing or thinking about? Was that something you had to focus on?
Yeah, definitely. The we spend more time. If you'd have told me 10, 15 years ago that I'd be in practice working on one-on-one, I probably would have laughed at you because I'm like, oh, we're not running anything that's going to require a lot of one-on-one stuff. But you know, you have to teach kids because the dribble drive is effective if you can beat your matchup. You know, so if we can if we can build the confidence with our players that they can at least make a quick move. You know, we don't want them dribble, 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 but make a quick move and get a structured penetration. And then I think everything else goes from there. But that's definitely the biggest thing is just building up the one-on-one, building up the ability to read the defense. So if they're hugging in the corner, I know she's probably going back door 9 times out of 10. If they're playing off, she's going to lift. I know if I'm driving and the 5, whoever's guarding the 5 steps up the floor, well, then that's a dump. That's automatic. We're dumping it off to the 5, and that's going to be a layup. You know, so just those levels of just understanding that needed to happen for our kids and just in their development. But I agree wholeheartedly. I don't think you can be effective in the dribble drive if you're not building multiple. And I mean multiple skills. They have to be able to dribble, you know, with
Hmm.
confidence. They have to drive, you know, extremely hard, and they have to put pressure on the rim with their drives, but be under control. They have to have the ability out of a very hard drive to make a good pass out, you know, because I'm not a fan of jump passes. So just those types of things that have to happen. So I think they've done well with it, considering you know we're still fairly new in our dribble drive attack,
Uh-huh.
but they've really come a long way with it.
I completely agree. As I was thinking about what you just said about, like, yeah, imagine having to teach one-on-one like skills for my team, you know, teaching them how to go how to do one-on-one. But you're right, like, we're gonna do dribble drive as the name implies. You gotta have the ability to drive. You gotta have the ability to dribble and get past your man or your woman. And what how does that process get taught in a way that clicks with players right away? What's because you know that I mean, you know, this stereotypically we kind of joke about sometimes our players, and you know, they got, you know, 25 different combo dribble moves and things that they work on and they do that
Mhm.
maybe aren't actually going to be useful in a game. But if we're actually thinking about implementing a dribble move that's going to get past their defender, that's going to get them to the basket? What are some teaching points that you give your players for that?
The biggest thing is we want it to be a quick move. So that's first and foremost. So like if you hesitate and just drive at their outside hip. So we always really want to attack their outside hip and just get them going downhill. And so the misconception that I think is out there though is a lot of people believe that your kids have to be uber skilled with their handle, when really and truthfully they just have to be effective in their drive. And so if I can catch it and I'm taking positive steps and I get my momentum going downhill, well, I don't have to do anything fancy in that moment, right? So if my teammate did their job, they owned the nail, they were able to draw two, and then I get that kick. Well, now all I have to do is just get downhill with a lot of momentum and put pressure on the rim. So I feel like when we do that, we actually set our kids up for success by telling them, all right, you are a drive first kid, and then we may have a kid out there that we're like, okay, you can be a shoot first kid, but you do have to kind of define it a little bit for some of them, and make sure that you have your better players taking, certain shots, and then your better drivers really getting downhill and setting up shots for them or getting to the rack and finishing. So you have to really figure out who your kids are, what their strengths are, but there's a strength that will work in the dribble drive for each and every one of them. If you're a good shooter, shots are going to find you. If you're a good driver, then driving lanes are going to find you. And you have to kind of preach that to them, that this is a one size fits all offense. If we all do it, then we kind of say we all can eat, so everybody can eat if we all do what we need to do.
And it's one of the tough things here as I kind of like think about kind of the next step here. And I imagine this would be a difficult concept to really refine and work on. And so I'd be curious your thoughts on that, is that decision-making process that goes in once that initial drive takes place. Once that drive takes place and that player's got to know, like, am I going to the rack? Am I able to dish out? And no jump pass. And I heard you say that, but is there something that can be taught as much with that decision making as it is just actually seeing it in live action and being able to adjust to it? When it comes to that decision making process on the drive, how much of it is instructional teaching points of what you're doing, and how much of it is like, let's look at it in live action and let's adjust to what the defense is doing?
No, it's definitely something you teach, because if your one starts in the slot and let's say she drives to her right and the two is to her right, well, she's got a full lane and it's one-on-one if the two is being hugged by their defender, right? So we know if they're hugging, well, now this is literally just one-on-one. But if she comes over and helps, then the two knows that I'm lifting. So that's an automatic in our offense. Like, they know automatically if I go to drive, the one goes to drive, and the two's girl is in the gap helping, the two's going to lift, we're going to kick. She's either got a shot or she's going to turn that down on the nail. And then now we get into the drive, and we may a Euro cut behind it. We may do some different things with it. But at the end of the day, that's an automatic read, but we have to rep that a ton. So when I say the one-on-one, we then go to 2-on-2. So that would be on one side of the floor. We're working on that. And we'd have that defender guard in multiple, ways, either hugging, either up the line or they're in the gap or, whatever. So, if she's hugging, then the two may automatically just backdoor off of that, So we have different reads that we put into that. And I think as they do it over time and we constantly rep that in game, it actually just starts clicking. And you look up and you're like, wow, I didn't even think she saw that. But because they've done it enough, they just automatically know if they defend us this way, we've got these options.
And I'm always curious when it comes to the implementation, refining, you're putting in your offense and refining it during practice. What do you need out of your defense when you're working on these drills? Are you working on anything specifically on defensive principles? Are you just shifting around what you want the defense to do? How do you kind of place your defense or work your defense into this as you're trying to make sure that your offense is doing the reads, doing the cuts, and doing everything correctly?
Yeah, and that's very key, because there are days I have to tell our girls, well, don't play our defense. So because we're a no middle team,
Yep.
So we would let you, if you want to dribble to that side, we'll let you dribble to
Dribble.
that
Yeah.
side as long as you're not, in the middle of the floor, right? That's where we don't want you to be. So, but traditionally, if you can imagine at the high school level,
Yep.
most programs, if they're really good, they're pack line defense. They're really good, or they're straight deny, all over the place. So we try to simulate more of those types of defenses, as opposed to our no middle defense. So, and that's an adjustment for our kids because, as the principles get ingrained, they're so used to sending the ball a certain way and reacting a certain way. But we get through it, and we talk through, hey, if they play us this way, although we don't do this, but we got to recognize that other people will, so, and we have those conversations. But I see their IQ level raised the more that we explain those types of things to them.
And are when you're running that, are you looking at like film and saying, hey, this is what our opponent's running up cover? Or are you just, like you said, kind of running like the what in general you see, like what you running like the scout team defense or something of like that sort?
Yeah, yeah. So it's the scout, and as the season progresses, and I got to give my kids credit. They watch a ton of film too. So usually by the time we get to practice, they'll say, "Oh, coach, yeah, I saw that, and I saw that this kid does this and that kid does that." So we look for tendencies. A lot of the time, if there's a kid who we feel is a little slack away from the ball, they disengage, which a lot of high school kids do disengage when they're away from the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're looking at, all right, can we backdoor this kid in certain situations when we dribble at, those types of things. So we get a lot more specific when we're in season, but right now here in the fall, we're just mixing it up and kind of preparing for the different looks we believe we will see. But definitely in season, it's a lot more intentional. It's definitely more dependent upon the other team's personnel, and we really look for certain matchups. We want to entice certain switches. We want certain kids caught in a scramble type situation. So, but that definitely gets to be a little more detail oriented.
Mm-hmm. So backtracking a little bit, we talked about, okay, you got when you're putting the layers in and as you start to implement it, we've got to make sure you got the terminology right. Got to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. I know that that's something that you mentioned. So as the terminology gets established and as the players start to understand the concepts behind it, what are we looking to add next? Are you doing it in breakdown drills, like small sided games, or are you working on it in a different capacity other than that? Once the terminology is there and once that's been established, what do you kind of see as like the next layer to kind of getting it going, the dribble drive?
Definitely the small sided game. So,
Mm-hmm.
1-on-1, the 2-on-2, the 3-on-3, like we just build it up from there. And just continuously just rep and reteach and kind of our thing here. And it's something we transitioned to about 3 seasons ago, which is we're going to run it until they can't get it wrong. I think if I made a mistake early in here, it was, they'll do it right, and I'd say, "Oh, you got it," and they say, "Yeah, I got it," and then we get in game, and I'm like, "I thought you said you had it," So no, we just rep it a ton, but we try to make it fun, so it's not, kids get a little bored, so we do use the small sided games just to keep the competitive juices flowing, but also to teach the things that we need them to remember within the dribble drive, and so I feel like that helps a ton, and then beyond that, shell, just getting
Yep.
out there and just running it shell and just 5-on-5, and maybe you just, just walk through that first, maybe you're half speed, and then you build up to, all right, we're all out, we're trying to score, and we make it a competitive game at that point. You get 5 possessions, the other team gets 5 possessions, whoever scores on the most possessions wins. So I think then they learn to be a little more intentional about, their shot selection, and because they want to win, and then they're a little more careful with the ball. So we have higher quality possessions in our practices, but those also translate into game.
Yeah, I really like the small sided game concept of implementing anything, and I'm sure you could speak to this, and you know this too. I remember I've done and still will on occasion, do some, whether it's 5-on-5 action. I found that in doing that, players tend to hide, or they can kind of like disappear a little bit, or you don't really get to work with them and really look at their skill set. But to me, if I can do any 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, like I get so much more out of that by seeing them in that small environment than really anything else.
I agree. And the players, I think, value the level of feedback that you can provide them in that moment, because it's instant, and you'll definitely be able to catch it. I agree with you. At 5-on-5, I probably have to go home, watch the practice film.
Yeah, it's not immediate feedback.
Note. Yeah, write a little note to myself to make sure that I talk to this player about this thing. But I agree with 3-on-3. Like when your eyes are just trained to look for certain things, you'll catch it. But I agree when it's 5-on-5 and there's a little pace and everything's happening, you'll definitely miss some things.
And to me, in a 5-on-5 situation, sometimes I'm not even 100% confident in some of the things I say that I saw. Like, oh, I saw you do this. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I saw you do this. But then if a player's type of coach, like if they're saying to me like, but I wasn't doing that, like, oh, they might be right. Like I'm pretty sure that's what I saw. But some a lot can get away from you sometimes in that 5-on-5 situation. So we talk about in those breakdown drills. How you're quick, you can be quick with feedback and quick with corrections. So what should coaches be aware of as they start to work in those small-sided games? What are going to be some mistakes or some errors that players are going to make that you think it's important that coaches kind of jump on right away and make sure they're fixing?
I would say two things: timing and spacing. You definitely got to teach kids to keep spacing out there with the dribble drive, because what I noticed, and it still happens with our kids, is as the drive gets going, they have a tendency to just start lifting early for no reason, and they just, because they're just anticipating I'm going to get the ball next. So they just start lifting early. And so it takes away the gaps that you want to create, and Coach Schaefer, he talks about it a ton, about creating those gaps and then those super gaps. So we really want players driving at super gaps. But, our players, sometimes they get what I call happy feet, because they're like, oh, I'm going to get it next. And they just start cheating up, and then they start bringing all that extra defense into an area that we don't want them to be. So I would say for sure, coaches would definitely have to get that timing down, teach them. We've taught the drop zone and we've taught the rack zone, and hey, if she's not in the drop zone, you shouldn't be lifting, those types of things. So, but you still have to remind them, and it's constant and it's ongoing. Well, at this level, at the high school level, for sure.
Sure.
But I'm sure at the college level, kids probably a lot more focused, and they'll be able to handle it a little more. But I find that high school kids, they tend to just want to creep up, and they just start bringing extra help where you don't need it to be, and then it just kind of becomes, instead of a kick up, now it's a handoff, and so it just really starts to defeat a lot of what you want to do.
I remember being told once by a coaching friend of mine, he ran a motion offense, and he was like, Coach, sometimes in practice, like I'm running this motion offense, but sometimes when players they're going in going through the motions offense sometimes. And I think that, like you kind of said, that idea of like just one player, they're driving, okay, I'm gonna go lift up, and just kind of not really thinking about the why they're doing it, almost like they're just reacting because this is what I always do, like this is always what happens. But like there is a level of, and a huge level, and as you mentioned, of being able to do a read and react and be able to kind of see what's happening there. And I think that maybe that's sometimes a misconception on a motion offense, is that it's just like this one singular continuous motion of same events happening over and over. And I know for my players, if I implement that, they really have to understand the idea of like, wait a minute, like I gotta really assess what's happening on the floor and then decide like what I got to do after that. I can't just always do one particular move or one particular motion every single time.
I agree. Be reactive and definitely trust your eyes. And that's the biggest thing, is we talk about eye discipline all the time, is, see it first and then react to it. But, sometimes, like you said, they'll go through the motions instead of just seeing it and then reacting to it.
So I think some listeners' ears probably picked up when you said you're not a jump pass person. So, well, why is that? And so if you're not gonna, if they don't jump pass, what in your offense, the way that you teach it, what's the right way to go about that pass after that drive?
So we teach our kids. I actually worked for a guy who's Australian when I was at the college level, and he always taught the drive and slide concept. I think more people call it the Euro cut behind. But our biggest thing is we want them to, one, land on two, and then reverse pivot and pass out of that, as opposed to jumping off the floor, passing, across their body. That's probably, if there's another pass that I can't stand, it's across the body. But my players know I'll just lose it with those, because those are just low percentage passes. A lot of times they're going the other way, or they're not going to be caught clean because they're behind someone. So we just try to teach them to really just be fundamentally solid in those moments, and give yourself options. Land on two, so you still have the option to shoot it. I feel like sometimes, well, not some, these kids, they start jumping in the air to make a pass, then they get stuck, and
Yeah.
now it just becomes a bad situation all the way around. So our biggest thing, we want them to always have options out of it. That I'll take a 3-second call before I take that live ball turnover going the other way for a layup. So, and that's what we tell them all the time. Like, just come to a jump stop. If you can't get it out of there, put it up towards the rim. Give us a chance on it, but don't just throw it away. And I just can't stand the low percentage passes.
I have spent, and I'm not upset about it at all, but I have spent quite a bit of time, me and the coaches that I'm with in the last couple of years, really working on jump stops, doing a lot of like jump stop, pivot, making solid passes, making solid moves out of it. Because I guess maybe we just came as a staff to some conclusion, or something happened a couple of years ago where I think we just were like, wait a minute, like our players don't jump stop on their own unless they're taught to, and I think there's so much more we could do as an offense if they just jump stop, get can have that mobility to go off either pivot foot, make a good pass, do basic basketball moves. But I feel like a long time ago, maybe I as a coach just got away from it, and then, like I said, a couple years ago, me and the other coaches really were like, let's get back to this, and let's really drive this home. And I just feel a lot more at ease with like a good jump stop and a good pivot mechanic, and making decisions that way.
I agree. When I coached on the boys side, I probably was guilty of that, because they're just so athletic at times that you
fall in love with it.
you forget, that, hey, we probably should be a lot more crisp and sound in this moment than we actually are. But no, I agree. It's easy when you have kids who are just that gifted and who can just make certain plays, even though they're probably not, the best plays, but they find a way to have a knack of, for doing it. On the girl side, though, I feel like you absolutely have to teach fundamentals. You're not gonna find too many kids that are just uber athletic that can really make up for bad mechanics. So we definitely just stress, ball security, valuing the possession, probably a little J right in our approach of, just playing off 2 feet. Come to a stop and just play off 2 feet, make a solid play. But we have to do it. I don't see, honestly, I don't see any way around it. But I know for a fact there's been times in my career where I've coached boys and I probably let it slide, and I shouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, and then I've coached girls a lot longer than I've coached guys, but I remember just my couple years coaching guys, I was like, oh man, these guys just jumping out of the gym, like, it's like, wait a minute, like, let some things slide, let it go, like, oh, look how athletic they are, look at the moves they can make on some of these things, like, who needs a jump stop anyway? And it's like, no, doing them a disservice, gotta make sure they got that down. Let's talk about your shooters here. So is there a process to teaching somebody how to be ready to shoot and move, and like you said, do that lift, be ready to catch, be ready to shoot? Is there a process you teach with that so that your players are ready to catch and release right away?
Yep. So, the biggest thing is simulating game shots for them all the time. So one thing I'll say, in 5 years, we probably gotten up more shots than anybody else in our region for sure. We just get up a ton of shots. I think I saw a stat a number of years ago. It's probably changed since then, now that the Curry effect has happened. But like I believe that it said something along the lines of the average kid might shoot 11 times in a practice, and I thought, wow, that's very low. But when you really think
Scary.
about it,
Yeah.
if you think about, what you're doing when you go through your ball handling, your passing, what the things you work on your defense, like a lot of these kids, that's probably their average. So we feel like we can beat the average by just being intentional. We get up a ton of shots. We do a lot of shooting games, and we try to simulate a lot of just game action shots on the move, catching shoot type situations. So biggest thing is I think we're probably traditional in our approach. Like when they're lifting, we teach them to catch it inside foot, 1-2, and then go from there as far as whether they're going to shoot it, pump fake, and rip and go, whatever they want to do in that situation. But at the end of the day, I feel like just getting up a ton of shots makes a world of a difference for our kids. I've actually changed, and I never thought I would. I used to be a stickler for shooting form. And then when I was at Newberry College, there was a kid who her form was probably the worst I've ever seen, but she was money every time. And so I've gotten away from just trying to refine form as much as just getting up shots. And I feel like if they can just perfect shots at whatever form they're using, they'll be successful. And we've actually we've done fairly well shooting the ball.
And I think it's a good point that you really got to consider, especially in any sort of motion offense that you run, dribble, drive, obviously, as well, is, there's such a difference between getting shots up before practice or after practice or working on the gun versus getting those shots within the flow of your offense. And I think that the easiest way to do that is to make sure, like you said, that they intentionally are doing it in practice. Otherwise, like they might have good form, they might be good shooters, but if they're not good shooters in the context of the offense, then I guess they're not good shooters, right?
No, because they don't have that rhythm, and I feel like offense is all about rhythm. So if I rep this a ton at this speed, at this pace, then the mechanics will carry me in the game, because the muscle memory is there. So
yeah,
I think a lot of times, coaches, not saying that we're the best at it, but I feel like sometimes coaches just, they go through the motions with their shooting drills, and they don't think about, all right, how do I get shots that are similar to what our kids are going to get in the flow of our offense, at game speed, with game readiness, and making game type decisions with that. So, but no, we try to be intentional every chance we get there. Our kids love, obviously they love shooting basketball. So they love any shooting drills we roll out there. But they really get after it.
Yeah, and again, is just kind of like a bow on that. I think that game speed shots is another thing too. Like they can get the shots and then I think that comes down to, right, like just the intensity and the speed that you run your practice at to make sure that your players are getting those shots up in the same context and in the same speed and the same heart rate, right, that they would be getting them in a game, because they can get to the right spot, but if they're going through the motions, as we talked about before, like that's still not a game shot if they're not in working at a pace that's going to be similar to what a game would actually be like.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. How many kids actually take, tired shots in practice? That's probably a thing. So, some days I try to move our shooting drills, after I know we're going to have a tough defensive segment. I might move a shooting drill behind that, and just so that they can get used to taking those, fourth quarter type, shots. So, just you kind of be creative about it and move it around. But some kids, they shoot while they're fresh, like you said, you mentioned the gun, they're fresh. They just go out there and they get up a ton of shots and they're not tired, but when that mental fatigue is there, and do you rely on your mechanics? Do you still do the same things? So I think you just have to put them in those types of situations,
to
develop good shooters.
Yeah, and to get that live experience of making sure that they're getting the pass that they need from whoever's passing it to them too, right? Those passes off the gun are pretty great, I know, but got to get the right pass in a game situation. And yeah, to your other point, it reminded me of whatever. Sometimes my most intense drill or the most intense drill we do as a team, that's all right. After that, all right, we'll shoot a couple free throws now that you're all exhausted, you're all punched over, because got to make a game ready.
Yep.
So what have you in your journey now, as you've been trying to make corrections and trying to perfect and tweak and work on this offense, what are some things that you've kind of changed or tweaked or modified or had to reteach or implement throughout the years to kind of get your offense to a better point now than it was when you were first running it?
Yeah, and that goes back to what I mentioned earlier because I noticed just the timing wasn't there. So, just
Yeah.
making sure that I'm really being laser focused on stopping practice and pointing it out every time. Hey, no, you're lifting too early. Just because sometimes I'll just kind of go because they get going into motion and it looks so good, and you just get caught up in that. But then, late in the game, and you need that spacing for that guard, and now it's clogged up. But they've been doing it all along, and you never corrected it. So, just trying to be intentional about those types of things, and then always reteaching. Always reminding, always making sure they absolutely can't get it wrong. And sometimes I go to say something and they're saying it before I say it. And that's when I know it's clicking. They're like, I know, coach, I should have done Bob, and that's what we're looking for is just that level of perfection within it, even though it's never going to be perfect, but the
Always
perfection of
chasing it.
understanding, you know. So it's just the perfection in understanding what you should do, as long as they know what they should be doing. That to me, that's half of the battle. And
Yeah, right.
now the other half is doing it, so but they'll get confident in that and they'll make it happen.
I I truly wonder sometimes if there's a better feeling for me as a coach than stopping something in practice and then having your players tell you or say what it was before you even mention anything. Like, okay, sounds
I
good.
love
Let's keep going.
I love it because that's when they're all in, and they're listening to you. And I laugh some days because they absolutely do listen. When you said that, I thought about we had tryouts last week, and there's a middle school girl, 8th grade, and she's in there trying out. And I said something to her, and she looked at me and she said, "Well, coach, you said I got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right?" I said, "Yep, I absolutely did say that." So but it's just that little reminder that they're always listening, um, and that makes me feel good because then that lets me know that it's sinking in and they're taking it to heart and they absolutely want to get it done. I feel confident we have kids in there who absolutely want to get it done the right way every time, and nothing against kids when I first got here, but we had kids who would fight information when I got here, and now we got kids who, they want to make it happen. So that's just such a good space to be in.
It cuts down on a lot of you can get a lot more done, I think, in your practices and as a program
Mhm.
in general when you don't have to fight it in that sense and they just
Mhm.
they just want to get better at it, right? And they just want to
Yep.
do it. No, that's for sure. So as we kind of think about in the future, and you said nothing's ever perfect, and unfortunately it never will be. But as you start to think now, okay, year 5, what's next here for the offense? What are you looking at in terms of what still needs to be maybe refined? Are there any new wrinkles you're looking to add or new elements to it? What's kind of next as you look to the future of continuing to add to this offense?
Yeah, we actually, or maybe it's just my level of comfort with the dribble drive. This year, I've implemented or merged the Princeton Point series into our dribble drive. So we've got about 3 sets there within the dribble drive that are Princeton oriented, but they fit. And I absolutely love that. And then today we actually just started putting in our Memphis dribble drive series just to get a different look, a better action. So we're emerging with it,
Hmm.
and that's the future of it. We're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep testing out new things and putting in different wrinkles. And we sat in a college practice and I was looking and coach had probably like 14 different, calls within the dribble drive. And I was like, man, I never even thought I could do all of that. But it got my wheels going and my juices flowing and I'm looking like, okay. But the biggest thing that I'm trying to do and be a better coach about is finding ways to because we're putting in quick hitters this year,
Yeah.
more Iverson type stuff, but how to flow out of those things into our dribble drive. So just being good about teaching, just those transitions and um, finding entry plays that may be able to disguise it a little bit, so it's not as scoutable as some teams would like it to be. So just we're emerging and evolving and just trying to do everything we can with it. So I think that it's going to be fun. We probably won't see a lot of man to man once we really get good at it, but we'll find a way to run it against the zone. So we'll keep tinkering with it though.
You go up against a lot of zone. What kind of defenses? I guess it'd be a good question to ask. Like, what have you seen defensively over the years? Has it been consistent? Have you seen a change in the way people try and defend against you guys?
Yeah. We've seen people come out. We've seen some junk defenses, whether it be boxing one, trying two. We've seen those types of things. We've seen people try to press us. We usually do fairly well against those things. The zone, we do decent against the zone, and we force people to come out into man. So that was when we first got here. We'd see a little more zone than we'd see man. And then since we've come here into the region, I feel like we must have had an impact or something, because it seems like everybody wants to run man now, which I'm all for it.
I like that.
Honestly, I'll be honest with you, Coach, and I hope no one kills me in here that's listening, but we don't run much zone, if any. So we're a man-to-man team through and through. So we practice against that a ton. But I have to take out time to make sure we go through zone stuff. But if more teams want to run man, hey, I love it. I'll take that every day of the week.
I'm a man person, so if to me
Okay.
you're not offended me at all. I mean, I do. I certainly have, and the staff has definitely run zone before, but I think that, and I'm sure you would agree, even if we wanted to do a zone, you still got to know how to do man. Like you still,
Well,
like
that's the key, and that's what I tell people. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because to me, I think that's the biggest misconception with the zone. You're not going to be as effective in the zone if you're not good as a man-to-man team, and I just believe that wholeheartedly. Syracuse has been good with their zone because they absolutely know how to defend in man. They just don't do it, as much as people would like. But when they do go man, they're really good in their man defense. So you just, to me, I feel like you got to teach man. You got to have good principles within your man that are transferable to your zone, and then you'll probably be a lot more effective in your zone.
I mean, I would challenge, and I don't think too many people would hopefully have an answer for me, but especially even at the high school level, I would love to hear a coach who does run zone who would tell me that like they don't do anything with man or teach anything with man. Like, how do you run your zone effectively if your players don't know how to do a man-to-man defense and the principles behind it? So
yeah, I got into it with somebody about that. I think it was on Twitter, and I said something about, how I just believe man-to-man is the way to go. And then someone said, well, I run a matchup zone. I said, yeah, but a matchup zone is essentially man, So I think, again, there's those misconceptions sometimes, and they think you're attacking zone when you're really just saying, hey, like your man principles, I promise you're somewhere in your zone defense, or else your zone's probably not effective.
And I think like some of the best zones that I see are the ones where like the other team doesn't even know if you're in man or in zone or not. Like it's like, what are they running? It's like, exactly, because that's exactly what you should be. You should be confused to that point. So
yeah,
no, I'm with you on that. But I'm glad you're seeing a lot of man though. I think that's good, and I think what it does. I'll let you speak to that though, is that maybe now you're seeing maybe more of those like one-on-one opportunities now, and one of those like, all right, here's your guy, it's one-on-one, you got to make a move and get by him sort of situations.
Yeah, I agree. It opens up the floor for us in ways we love within the dribble drive. Even with us defensively, and our man, like we're able to do so many different things within it. Like I don't have to go and run a box in one. I can actually just send a kid out there. We did a lot last year where we just face guard the best player, and we have our traditional man principles everywhere else on the floor. So we just found ways within our man to do some of the things that I think teams feel like you have to put in a different defense to do. So, that I think that's what started that conversation on Twitter when I said, hey, and man, you can absolutely do anything that a zone or whatever junk defense you want. Like you can do it. You just have to have the principles. So and we scout certain kids, and hey, if they're on this side of the floor, we shade them to the right, or we shade them to the left because, maybe they're not strong dribbling to the left, those types of things. So we don't feel like we have to go and change everything we do for an opponent. We just tweak our principles for just that one kid, and everybody else gets the traditional look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. You don't have to blow everything up, right?
Yeah, like I don't have to sit in there. I think when I first got here, because we weren't as strong, I would have to spend a practice like, okay, we need to go work on the triangle 2 today, and I was like, oh gosh,
The triangle. Oh no, not the triangle 2.
oh, so, well, there's a team that just had 2 kids, and we just weren't strong in the man yet. And so, but I'm glad we're far away from that stuff. But
Hey, I had a boxing one day a few years ago, so
oh,
I remember I was like, oh, like I felt gross, and I was like
was it
almost.
miserable?
I want to. I don't think I did, but a big part of me wanted to almost apologize to the other coach at the end of the game. Like I feel bad. Like I don't like this at all. Like,
Yeah,
but it is. There's a reason you still see it, I guess. But
yeah.
I don't know. I think I'd rather just get run off the court at this point than even try and implement. I don't know. I couldn't do it passionately. Put something like that
No,
in. I don't
no,
think anymore.
yeah.
So before we hit our concluding statement, I wanted to ask about dribble drive, about finishing at the rim, because I almost forgot to ask about it, and so, especially on the girls' side too, because I think that we sometimes we maybe shy away, or girls can shy away because they're not, coaches maybe don't enable or empower their girls as much to finish strong at the rim in these sort of situations. So I wanted to ask you about finishing at the rim. Are there things that you go over with your girls about how to finish strong, finish through contact, things that you do to work on that? What kind of goes into that process?
Yeah, we simulate that. We beat them up with the bag on
Throw
their
the
drive.
pads on them.
Yeah, and we knock them around. But the biggest thing that I see, and especially on the girls' side, is a lot of girls just aren't being taught a variety of ways of just scoring a layup. So I have to teach our girls an underhand finish as opposed to an overhand finish. So those types of things. And when do I use it? How do I stretch from my defender to get this underhand
Mm-hmm.
and finish type thing? So we do that. We work on those finishing moves every day. And they start out some days, at the beginning of the fall, and it looks ugly. And then by the end, and we get closer to the season, we're starting to look in there now, and it's looking a little more clean and a little more crisp. But, the biggest things, we want them to play off 2 feet, and we want them to seek out contact. So we always teach our kids to land the first blow when going down there. Like, hey, that defender's there, you cut them off, you land that first blow, and then you extend and try to finish. Because I'm an analytics guy. And there's still the value for the 3 ball, then the layup, and then the free throw. So we want we want to get one of those 3 for sure. So we want them to seek out contact on finishes. That's the primary thing. We want to put pressure on the referee to make that call. And so our kids are really getting better about just cutting off angles from the defender, and really just kind of leaning into them and seeking that contact, and then finishing through it. So, but it is an intentional thing. It is something you have to work on. I think that the biggest disservice girls get is that they're just not being taught.
Yeah.
And so what you'll see, especially at this level, when they come into me, is there's just a lot of missed layups, because they're just not used to contact, and I was working in elite camp, I think it was a month ago, and I'm just like, oh, how many missed layups did we have in this gym today? But it's just something that you can tell that kids just aren't working on, and they're not having to do that in practice, and I think maybe the better players are your best finishers, obviously, but these other kids can be really good finishers. You just got to take time out to teach them how to finish,
Mm-hmm.
and get them used to contact.
Yep. Yeah. I think that it's a skill, and it's not one, as you mentioned. I think that a lot of girls, at least in my experience that I've worked with, have like a certain way they can finish at the basket, but that might be the only way, and that's it. So like you said, like a scoop layup, or even some of these other things, like they gotta have them built in. They gotta have that package ready to go, and it takes time, but I think I think they pick it up pretty quickly. I think if you just work with them and you give them some time on it, and you show them the why and how it works, like they'll get it. They just got to have somebody teach them, like you said, right?
Intentional with it. Yeah.
Yep. Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with this first one, which is
Okay.
thinking back on your coaching career. What is a coaching moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Uh, I would say 5 years ago coming in here.
Mm.
I came in and it's kind of like you mentioned earlier. It's like the interview was still going, right? And so, what do you do with that? When you feel like everybody's being critical, maybe you weren't their hire that they wanted, or whatever the case may be. I would just encourage any coach out there who's starting out, who's new in a program. Maybe heck, you might even be 2, 3 years in. Just stay the course. Stay the course. There's nothing like time. And one thing about working at these levels is the kids matriculate through, so um, if you're just intentional of building behind whatever class you start with, and that's what I did is, I leaned in with our middle school, I leaned in with our JV, and then, I just made sure we were building behind those kids. But um, continue to just keep your head down and rise above on certain things. I think that you see this big push for referees to get better treatment. I really feel like coaches need that same push at times. You I feel like if we're not careful, we're going to lose really good coaches
Yeah.
in this business. And I'm even more keen to that for girls basketball. Girls basketball just cannot afford to lose good coaches. And so I think there needs to be a little push made, and I think I probably got ahead of you, but it's a little bit of my soapbox there.
No,
It's
no,
just
you're good.
I think I really do feel like, the same attention that you see happening from the NFHS about treatment for officials, we need that same thing happening. We need administrators to step up, insulate the coaches a little better, because some coaches are dealing with just absolute abuse from the stands,
Mhm.
and I just feel bad, some days when you just listen to that stuff. But ultimately, we need good coaches, and we need young coaches coming into the business to want to stay and to find this as rewarding as I found it to be. Even though I'm 33 years old and I'm still considered one of the young and up and comers in the state, but um, I do look some days. And 5 years ago, I remember telling someone, I said, "Hey, 5 years from now, if I'm still in this business, I'll be surprised." That was my thought process 5 years
Yeah.
ago. And so the amazing thing about me saying that is 5 years later and I'm having the time of my life. I absolutely love the kids in our program. I love how they come in and work. I love what they embody. I love that they embrace our motto here of take the stairs, and they take the stairs every day, and they work hard, and they just make it fun. Like, I look forward to going into practice every day.
Yeah.
But I've had tremendous support here from my administration, so it makes a difference. And hopefully an administrator hears this, and they'll figure out ways to insulate their coaches a little better.
Hey, if do you want any more to add? You got to your soapbox too, right there. You
Yeah, that was
good
it.
transition defense or offense right there. You got right into it. No, that was I think I'm gonna co-sign in particular one part that you mentioned, because it's just very passionate to me, being a women's coach, and we see the decline, as we talked about at the beginning, of women's basketball at the high school level and at the youth level. And then you also mentioned too, it feels like we're seeing a lot of women's coaches be discouraged or get run out, or just have just feeling that frustration. And I think that there needs to be a big rally in the coaching profession to keep coaches, especially those good coaches, in. And really on that girls side, we need really good coaches, people who are going to stick around, reinvest in our girls programs, because right now I'm speaking to the choir and speaking to you, but we're in a spot right now where we're struggling in a lot of places. And I think that we don't need to be making it harder on ourselves by running off potentially great coaches off of this profession.
No, we're running good coaches out the door. And like this year, I can't even find JV games hardly for my coach, my JV coach. So you just see this decline happening, and I'm like, oh my gosh, So you think about it though, that there's a JV coach who now isn't going to get that experience of coaching. because they don't have enough kids, so what does that look like for their development? So I just look at it and I see it happening and I'm like, hey, we gotta, I agree with you. Somebody's got to rally. But I will say I've had 3 ADs in 5 years, and the last 2 in particular have been all in with me when I said, hey, we got to grow our numbers here, and that's my primary focus, is growing this program. And anything that I've needed to make that happen, they've been all for it. They know that it's something that I'm passionate about. Because 5 years ago when I walked in the door, my very first assessment was, this is a program on life support. We had maybe like 20 kids show up. I'm like, man, how do you feel 2 teams with 20 kids? And just, so, you have to dip into your middle school quite a bit, and so you just look at those things. But I'm just so grateful that we're growing and we're kind of fighting against the odds a little bit.
Yeah.
But I know there are coaches out there just like me who are passionate, just like you who are passionate, who will pour into their programs, and they just need the support, and they need someone to articulate that to the community, to the fans, that, hey, this coach is giving us all they got. We need y'all to, instead of discouraging, we need you to actually go out there and encourage young ladies to come out and participate. And you got a niche, you got somebody you can encourage to come out. So I think you're spot on when you say that rally cry needs to happen. I think if it doesn't happen, we're going to be in a bad spot when it comes down to girls basketball. And I believe that's in the next 3 years if nothing changes.
Yeah, well put. And I think that we just make a small difference within your own community that you can, and let that keep going and keep spreading it. And I think that's a great place to start. Build it up where you're at, and promote it, share it, show all the great things that are going on, and build it that way, kind of that grassroots movement there. And I think just make your area a little bit of a better place as best you can. Awesome.
Amen.
Coach Johnson, thank you so much, man, for talking about your offense, talking about some women's basketball, dribble drive, where your coaching journey and kind of where it's been, where it's going, what you got going on in the future. Looks like you got a lot of great things going on. Hopefully that dribble drive keeps going the direction that you want and things keep going in the right direction. So thank you so much, Coach. Best of luck this year. And it was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.